Zurich Film Festival. Conversations that celebrate cinema. 'Cause life is better with movies.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very special moment in the history of our festival. One of the most iconic actors from Hollywood will come on stage and talk about his career. He has starred in milestone classics such as The Insider, Gladiator, which won him an Oscar, Robin Hood, or A Beautiful Mind, to name just a few. He's in town with his new film Nuremberg, and he will receive our prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award tonight. But he's not only an actor, he's also a gifted director and a rock musician. Please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the one and only Academy Award winner Russell Crowe.
Hello?
Everybody.
What was that? You don't.
You love to post on X photos from a city you are and ask, where am I? So we saw your chocolate and the Lake of Zurich. I wonder, is it the first time you're here in Zurich?
No, it's the third time I've been to Zurich, and about the sixth or seventh time I've been to Switzerland. But last night was the first time I've ever stayed the night in Switzerland. So usually it's just I come in to visit somebody, or I drive through, from Vienna to Milano or something like that, or sometimes like I've flown here from Montreal, then to get on another plane to fly somewhere else. So it's my first time coming out of the airport and actually having a look around, and they've put me up in a glorious hotel which has a beautiful view, and everything that I've seen so far is so beautiful, man. It's so beautiful here.
We love having you here. Thank you for being here.
Cool.
You come with a film you're about to present tonight called Nuremberg. And I must say, I saw it 2 months ago in Los Angeles, and when I left the theater, I told producer Frank Smith, this is a monumental performance, and you're having Oscar materials at hand. You play Hermann Göring, the highest-ranking Nazi who survived World War II. When James Vanderbilt asked you to, or invited you to play that role, were you reluctant, or did you immediately say yes?
There's a nuance to that, because I was reluctant to read it. But once I'd read it, in my profession, quite often you step into a job on sort of a leap of faith, I'll give you a small example, then we'll come back to talk about Nuremberg. But, when I did Gladiator with Ridley Scott, the two of us just sat in his office night after night, just like yelling at script pages, going, well, this is shit, that's rubbish, that's bullshit. So before we started shooting, we'd taken that 110-page script, and we only agreed on 21 pages. And now we're about to go make the movie. So when we sit and talk about it, because people often talk about Gladiator in such glowing terms, but Ridley and I see that experience as one of the greatest bullet-dodging exercises in the history of cinema, because he had a budget, and he had a cast, and he had everything that he needed, but we didn't have a script. So pretty much on a daily basis, we'd get together, and we would try to rewrite everything that was coming towards us, By the time we finished the opening sequence, we'd run out of script pages. The one scene that stayed was the Busy Bee scene, with Joaquin, and he's talking about to his nephew and to his sister about her plotting in the background. And so that scene was great. So we kept onto that. But then we sort of filled everything around it. So basically the whole plot is reverse engineered from the time we first started shooting, you know. However, Nuremberg is a very different situation. Nuremberg was a beautiful script. It was very well balanced. And it, to me, and reading it, it gave a great insight into this moment in history. So I was connected to it immediately. I mean, that tends to be the thing. If you read something great as an actor, that you have to do that. You know, you have to do that movie. And so going into that, you know, situation was great, except I signed on in 2019. And then they lost their finance. And we had to wait. And then it got put back together again. And they lost it a second time. They lost it a third time. It took 5 years for the film to actually come together. And that 5 years is on top of the 7 years it had taken Jamie Vanderbilt to get it to that point where he sent it to me. So sometimes you just have to be very patient. You just have to wait, you know. And I'd made a decision to keep myself in a certain place because I was coming off the back of the Roger Ailes TV series, Loudest Voice. And so I sort of had to, you know, stay in that place waiting for Nuremberg to come up. You know, sometimes things disappear altogether. You know, you can find online, there's a whole bunch of movies that I'm connected to that never got made, you know. But with Nuremberg, I just felt it in my water. I felt a confidence in Jamie, a love for the script, and a fascination for the character. So,
what did James say? Why he wanted you to play Göring?
I was the best that he could afford in my price range.
Well, the money was very well invested then. How familiar were you with Göring's life and the role he played in the Nazi regime?
Well, you know, I am a little bit of a history buff, so I do have a dangerous level of knowledge of a lot of things. Dangerous in that I don't really know what I'm fucking talking about, you know. But every now and then, you know, you get the opportunity to focus on something. And, you know, that excites me. You know, some people see that as hard work or whatever, but that to me is the delight when you're actually searching for something and you start digging through things and you know, one idea, you can't assume what it is you're going to find out. You know, you just have to have the energy to go looking. And because it's such a well-documented period of history, I was able to like pinpoint his life from the time he was a kid, you know, through school, you know, like even where he went to school, the marks he got at school. I was able to find this stuff. I was able to find sections of the German version of what the British Parliament would call Hansard, the political record of whatever said in Parliament House. So I was able to find attitudes of his that were like off the cuff. You know, he hadn't planned to say something, but somebody got under his skin in Parliament and he blasts them, and I can read that. And I was like, oh, okay. So I get a different level of his personality and his charm and his wit and also his sort of penchant for burying his opposition. If somebody said something to him in that, you know, Parliament House where he was the Reich Marshal, you know, the head of the German Parliament, he would frickin' crucify people, you know, and I like, including Goebbels, you know. There's on record telling Goebbels he's a moron. That was interesting, right? Where's that coming from? You know, so I started sort of looking into it. I started to really see that he connected himself to people that he thought he would take him forward. And he always believed, and that's the height of egotism, that he could totally control the narrative. And that was fascinating to me, because at a certain point, around about 1942, he lost control of the narrative. And then, you know, what does he do now? Because if he keeps going back to Rome, he's going to get stabbed on the steps, you know what I mean? So he stays out of the center of things, and Goebbels and Himmler and Heydrich, they sort of take over. They get Hitler's ear, you know? So it was just very interesting for me to be able to delve into it, you know, to find out that he was a terrible student in normal school, right? And then as a punishment, his parents and his godfather decided they were going to send him to military school. And he was, yes. What? So he goes to military school. He goes from being at the bottom of his class to the top of his class. Comes out of military school, goes into the army. The First World War is starting. He has one experience on the ground in a battlefield. He gets wounded. And he says to himself, that's not for me. I got to get up there. I got to be up there where the planes are, right? So he basically puts himself in a series of positions to get instructed in how to be a pilot. Now, all this time, he's actually supposed to be reporting for duty back to his infantry command, but he doesn't do that. He stays with the Air Force guys, and eventually, when they start losing pilots, he gets the opportunity, becomes a pilot. By the end of the First World War, he is in charge of Baron von Richthofen's squadron. He has 22 kills. That means he's 3 times a fighter race. Through the 20s, he's on cigarette cards in cigarette packets. He's a fucking hero, you know? It's very interesting to see how he takes that position and he looks at the political landscape and he goes, who am I going to connect myself with? Who's going to take me the furthest, right? And he sees Hitler talking in a coffee shop upstairs for 30 people. And he goes, this guy is mad enough to actually follow through on what he's saying. So I'm going to stick with him. So it's just very interesting to see where he came from, how he progressed, who he became, and the situation that he got himself involved in. It's, to me, it's one of the greatest benefits that you can have of the job is when you get to actually delve into something at the right level.
Thank you for this background information. Göring was known to be very charismatic, and if you study history and you know this from book, it's one thing. To see it now in a feature film on screen, it's another thing. I think you created the image that will last for many we have from Göring. How did you walk this fine line between making him magnetic, charismatic, but not too sympathetic?
Well, I think the sympathetic thing takes care of itself because of who he is and what he did and who he was connected to. So you're never going to be fully sympathetic to that man, you know?
Hopefully.
But trying to put a little bit of truth on the table as well, because not everybody is all evil. And not everybody is all good. And that's one of the things that Jamie Vanderbilt, the director, allowed me to follow through on, in that you can enjoy his company, but he will still remind you, because he can't help it, of who he truly is. So, are you guys going to watch the movie tonight? Cool.
So another surprising aspect for many of us is this psychiatrist who had to analyze him in prison. He's played by Ramy Malek, and it's really a psychological showdown between the two of you. Did you know Ramy before, and
No,
how did you prepare?
I'd never met Ramy. We just met on the set. We didn't even meet before we started shooting. Basically, I think we met either maybe the night before or the day where we shot. You know, Ramy's obviously very talented and brings a lot of stuff to the table. And that was very interesting working with him because, you know, he gets a determination in his head about a character. And, you know, it's a hard role to play because, you know, I don't want to give away things from the movie. Things that happen in that character's life are quite surprising. And Ramy was very brave. He just pushed himself straight into it. But this whole cast, for me, it was like walking into a saloon in the Wild West. Every motherfucker is a gunfighter. Every person in that room is gonna frickin' win at the end of the day. You know, they have their guns, they have their skills, and they're ready to fight. And that was a great energy, you know. Michael Shannon, one of the greatest American actors that there's ever been. He is a towering fucking performer. And we'd met before, Michael and I. We did Man of Steel together, where I played Jor-El, Superman's dad, and Michael played Zod, formerly my best friend, but now politically my sworn enemy. And so we knew each other, right? We'd worked together side by side in a gym in Illinois for 3 months doing this fight sequence. And so I knew his capabilities, his capacities, his humor. It's actually one of the great things of any given day that I'm on set with Michael, trying to make him laugh, right? Because the thing is, he looks like a very dour person, and he does, like, you know, present that face to the world quite often, but I can make him laugh. And so I would do it every single day. And there's a particular scene in this movie that on the page was 17 pages long. You know, 3 pages is a long scene in a film. 5 pages is a very long scene. 17 pages is fucking ridiculous. You know, and I'm looking at it, and then I looked at the schedule, and I see they've broken it up. So they want to shoot this 17 pages over 4 days. I felt that wasn't gonna, because there was no natural breaks. It was one conversation. So I called Michael, and I said, man, have you looked at the big one? And he goes, yeah, the 17 pages? God damn. And I said, they want to shoot that over 4 days. He goes, oh, shit. Do you think we can influence that? And I said, yeah, Michael, we can influence that. So the two of us had a meeting with Jamie, and I could see in Jamie's eyes, the two of us are sitting there trying to convince him, you know, to tell the production that he's going to nail 17 pages in one shooting day. And I can see in his eyes, one was like, it's impossible, but the other side of it was, it's exactly what he was hoping for. So, you know, we said, look, man, we'd like to have a go at just doing the scene as one piece, you know. You set it up so we have multiple cameras and shoot both sides of the conversation, and we'll just go for it. And he said, you know, the production is not going to let me schedule the scene like that because it's just not humanly possible to shoot 17 pages in one day. I said, Jamie, Michael and I are extraterrestrial. We're from Krypton. And so he let us do it, man. And we did 11 takes on the day. The first 8 takes were the entire scene. And I'm not bullshitting you. That room that was full of people, full of extras, were sitting in Budapest. There's like 600 people in the room. That room burst into applause on cut every single take. Every time we would go at it, we would find different ways to try and get around each other. And that's the whole thing about the scene. He's trying to fuck me up, I'm trying to fuck him up, and we just went for it, right? And the people in the room were responding to it. And I think it comes off quite well in the scene. But that's that insane thing. We did shoot 17 pages in one day, saved the production 2 days, which is hundreds of thousands of euro. So that producer is... the producer, Richard Saperstein, is now one of my best friends.
He's at the marriage of his daughter today, that's why he can't be here. I mean, you've worked with the biggest directors, Ridley Scott 5 times, Michael Mann, Ron Howard. One of the jobs of a film festival is to impose new directors, and I think James Vanderbilt is someone whose name we should memorize. Please talk about how it was to work with him and why you hopefully share my opinion that
look, it was
it's
an
the birth
absolute,
of a great new director.
Look, you're totally right. You're totally right. And I'd say the next 5 to 10 years, once people in money-making decisions, who have the power to make those decisions, once they see his work, they're basically going to be saying to Jamie, "What do you want to do now?" So for the next 5 or 10 years, I think we're going to see some incredible work from him. The thing about Jamie is he did direct a movie with Redford and Cate Blanchett called Truth. And it was very well received, but it did not do, anything much at the box office. And the thing with Jamie is that he has produced a bunch of stuff, he's written a bunch of stuff like Zodiac, but he's also done a lot of favors for people where he goes in and he fixes scripts and he doesn't get credit. And I know that sounds really wacky, but it happens way more than you realize. As a lot of the movies that I've been involved in have not been written by the people that are credited as the writers, or have not been completed by people who are credited as the writers. It's just a thing that happens. So he's already in a situation where everybody in town owes him a bunch of favors, right? And now he's done this, and he's really put down his cards on the table and saying, I'm a director to be, reckoned with. And on a daily basis, Jamie would find the time to come and talk to me about what we're doing. We would search for the little special pieces of every single thing we're about to do because he was that focused. And it was just, nothing felt rushed with Jamie. Nothing felt like it was in a panic. He'd had so many years of waiting for the movie to be realized that he'd been able to sift through things himself and go, okay, actually I don't need that bit. I need this bit. I want to see this connection. I want to see that. I want to, working with him from my perspective was an absolute dream. I really, really enjoyed his company, his sense of humor. I enjoyed challenging him, and I enjoyed the fact that he rose to those challenges. And he wanted the movie to be great. And sometimes that means you have to sort of disagree about something for a minute until you both see each other's perspectives. So I could not speak any more highly about Jamie Vanderbilt as a director. He's fantastic.
Thank you. Russell, mein Name ist Christian. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Not at all. I'm an actor. It's just a trick.
So you you didn't study German?
I studied what I needed to study in order to play the character. But sometimes that really depends on the situation they put you in. Like, I have done movies where I have confidently done another language, only to find out in post-production that nobody who speaks that actual language can understand what the fuck I'm talking about. And that's often because they give somebody the job of being like a dialect coach or whatever, who does dialects, not languages, right? On this particular movie, it was a crazy decision, but I'd met a girl, she might actually be in the room, I'd met a girl called Nova Nuremberg in Germany in the early 2000s. And I knew her to be highly intelligent because we had lots of conversations. So I just reached out to her. I said, look, I know we haven't really talked for 20 years, but would you like to be a dialect coach on a feature film? And so she came on board. And the great thing about that is she's a German speaker, so she wouldn't let anything go by. She wouldn't let a single vowel or syllable go past unless it was correct. And I've had half a dozen people now ask me since they've started seeing the film, when did you study to speak the German? It's like, yeah, so it's like, sometimes it really depends on the people that you gather around you to help you get things right. And Nova was a fantastic addition to that production.
How do you shake off a character like Göring once the shooting is done and it's your free time in the evening?
Anybody who's in this room who focuses on their job, right? You might finish at 5 o'clock. It's not over, right? You go home. You might be making dinner. You start thinking about shit. You start talking to yourself about stuff, about thinking, planning ahead. What's happening the week after, the next week? What's happening? You do not just step out of it. It stays with you. And sometimes it can be, a significant amount of time before it goes away. And, I'm not trying to be silly about it or whatever, but this role was haunting. It wasn't healthy. And I was so glad when the shoot was over. But that's the place you have to go to if you want to do it properly. You have to allow it to, get under your skin. And that's just the way you do it.
You've already won an Oscar for Gladiator. I predict you will get a nomination for this role. Is it exciting to be back in the award season race?
My life is so good right now. It's so good because nobody really gives that much of a shit, right? They still appreciate my work, and I get, Netflix and Amazon Prime and stuff's fantastic for me because people miss a movie like next 3 days or whatever. the Paul Haggis film. Then 11 years later, it goes to #1 on Netflix. Beautiful, thank you very much. And so I have this thing where my relationship is now back with the audience, and it's back with the people who actually see movies, and I'm totally happy there. That's kind of LA Confidential level fame, where you get, led into nightclubs, you get a nice table at a restaurant, people look after you, but there's no bullshit. Oscars bring lots of bullshit. So my preference is that I don't ever get into that situation again. I have one. Who needs two? I've got a fucking...
You were born in New Zealand. How did you become an actor?
That's a funny thing, because every now and then that night we were just talking about, how did I get here? I was born in Wellington, New Zealand. How am I standing on the stage at the Oscars? It was just crazy. But my grandfather was a cinematographer. He was in the New Zealand film unit. He went to war as a cinematographer. He went to every single theatre of war that Australian and New Zealand troops went to. So he shot in the deserts, he shot in Europe, he shot in the swamps of Papua New Guinea, he shot in Bougainville. He was actually given an award by, would have been the King of England at the time, called an MBE for his war photography. Now, after the war, he set up a little film company called Peach Weems Astor, and they made government movies about forestry and sheep farming, and he did TV commercials and things like that. And some of his friends from the film unit went into other aspects of the film industry, and one of whom was a guy called Roger Myrams, who is commonly understood, for the people who are still old enough to remember him, to be the cheapest producer in the history of the Australian film industry. The man most likely not to pay you properly. And he convinced my mum, over a series, who was his goddaughter, over a series of dinners, Jocelyn, your food is amazing. You should be a film caterer. Because he knew he wouldn't have to pay her properly, right? So my mum became a caterer on films and on TV series and on commercials. And so from the time I was a little boy, if you go to my mum's work, it's a film set, And so we would often be on the film sets. And one day when I was 6, my mum was working on a TV show called Spy Force. The lead actor was the great Jack Thompson. I don't know if you know Jack's work, Sunday Too Far Away, Breaker Morant. He's a fucking great actor. He's basically Australia's Brando in a way, The amount of kids that they needed for this scene with some orphans who'd been taken by the Japanese, they didn't have the right amount of kids turn up. So the first AD comes over to my mum and says, "What's your boy doing? Can he come and be in the thing?" So that's how I got my first job. And I actually had a line of dialogue that I was supposed to deliver. But when it came for the turn for me to deliver my dialogue, I couldn't talk. I was just so nervous, right? So it's me and Jack Thompson, and they say, "Action," and he goes, "So where are you hurt, kid?" And I'm supposed to reply, and I can't reply because I'm just so nervous. The line was supposed to be, "It's my ankle," right? And so action, he does his line. I don't reply. Fucking hell. Okay, reset it again. Action, I still don't reply. So the director's like, "Okay, we just have to get another kid. We'll just get another kid." And Jack's like, no, just roll. Jack did this, right? So they're rolling, action, and he goes, "All right, so it's your wrist." And it confused me, and I went, no, it's my ankle. Now, Jack Thompson and I are still friends. He just had his 85th birthday or something the other day, And we worked together in the 90s, 93 or something, on a movie called The Sum of Us, where he played my dad. And it's one of the things about this business that I love so much. You have these things that I call the karmic circles, you know? So it's just like I just told you the story about Michael Shannon. Again, that's another example, the karmic circle, right? We're back together again, working on another thing. People say it's impossible, but we fucking know it's not. We know that we can turn that film day into theater, you know? So that's how I started acting. It was just purely a piece of luck. And I did a bunch of little things when I was a kid. And then we moved countries. I moved from Australia back to New Zealand. In New Zealand, there was no kind of connection to the film business or television business at all, you know. So I sort of started moving into music, and then from music into musical theatre. And then I went back to Australia, and suddenly all of these things, this combination of things that I'd done were actually, you know, serious credits in Australia. So I was able to get an agent. You know, once I decided, you know, I did Grease, the musical, and then I did Rocky Horror Show. I did 415 performances of Rocky Horror. I played Eddie, the guy that comes out of the fridge, sings Hoppatootie, Bless My Soul, gets killed by Frankenfurter, shoved back in the fridge. And the theatre tradition on a touring show is that that guy play Eddie, comes back as Dr. Scott. Now I'm like 21. I'm playing a 60-year-old scientist in a wheelchair who has an accent. And that was really exciting. And that's when I realized, hey, you know, I love music, but there's this other creative impulse, there's this other thing that I think I could do something significant with. And so I was about 21, 22, and it just flipped in my mind. I put acting above music. So that's how it was.
Are your parents proud of what you achieved?
Unreasonably, as all parents should be. Yeah, I mean, my dad's not around anymore. But my mum, you know, she saw it when I was a kid. She knew it was there. She would tell everybody. And then one day I proved her to be right.
There is an interesting film everybody who is a fan of Russell Crowe should watch, Romper Stomper. You play a skinhead. Tell us about this film and how it helped shape your career, or didn't.
Well, that was one of those things where, you know, the script wasn't perfect. The director, Jeffrey Wright, was kind of insane, but competent. Insanity's fine as long as you're competent. And I just knew at that point in time, I'm never going to get a second script about neo-Nazi skinheads, you know? And I just felt that, you know, that subject matter was going to make a big splash, because at that time in Australia, and it's actually happening again now, which is very unfortunate, because it got the film actually put to bed a lot of bullshit back in the day, you know, in terms of sort of the white lace wearing racist skinheads, you know, because there's a lot of other skinheads that just like having short hair and listen to sort of crappy music, you know, that's fine. But then there's a different, you know, there is a percentage of skinheads who are all about the politics of it, you know. But yeah, I mean, that is a very kind of ruthless decision, knowing I put myself through this, I play that character, there's no fucking way that won't get noticed, you know? But to balance up for it, the very next movie I did, it was The Sum of Us with Jack, where I played a gay rugby-playing plumber. And it just amused me that anybody who was really turned on by the idea of what I'd done in Romper Stomper was going to get so fucked up going to see The Sum of Us.
But you were so convincing in that role that a couple of casting directors thought you were really a skinhead cast from the street. Is that true?
No, it wasn't casting directors. It was one particular actor in Los Angeles who had quite a bit of power at the time. And I would go meet people, and they would say, oh, you know, blah, blah was just, you know, here last week. And he said that, you know, this was your first movie and you'd never done any acting. It's like, what the fuck? And it was one of those things where they were somebody was trying to like get in my way by making up a story. Yeah, I'm not going to bless that guy by mentioning his name. However, it's sort of, coming into America, having worked on Australian independent films, you've got to think about the time period, 91, 92. They know Mel Gibson, right? And they know Judy Davis. That's the full extent of the actors that they know from Australia at the time. And Mel Gibson was born in America, so they all considered him to be American anyway. And Judy Davis played so many English women, they thought she was English, they didn't realize she was Australian. So, I'd be doing meetings with directors and be pulled aside by producers saying, hey, man, don't speak in your natural voice. Just, talk like an American, pretend you're from Oklahoma or something, and then it won't be an issue, right? And I'm like, I don't want to work with a director that's that fucking stupid, That I could sit in front of them, I have to pretend to be somebody, so then they'll hire me to pretend to be somebody yet again. So what point in time are we going to be on the set where that guy realizes that I've just bullshitted him, Or that guy or that woman realized that I just bullshitted to get the job? And it's like, no. I can't work properly if I don't have a completely straight, clear relationship with the director that I'm working for. And that's the thing that people sometimes misunderstand. I make a decision to work with the director, to work for that director on that director's vision. It's not about my sensibilities. It's about trying to reach the point where you satisfy that person's sensibilities. So that has to be a very truthful and clean relationship. So, I just sort of stuck to my guns with that, and sooner or later, but it did. It took me 2 years of going in and out of Los Angeles before I actually got an American job offer, And that was only because Sharon Stone stepped in and went, we're hiring this guy, for the movie The Quick and the Dead with Sam Raimi, because she was a producer on it, And she set it up because they wouldn't do a test or whatever. So, between her and Sam Raimi, they came up with the money to shoot a proper old-fashioned screen test. So I had to go to the Universal lot, get into costume and everything. And halfway through it, Sharon came over to me and said, come with me. You've got to hear this. So we walk into a room. There's just a phone, old-fashioned phone, on speaker. She closes the door. She goes, okay, Mike, what were you saying? Right? And he doesn't know I'm in the room. He goes, Sharon, here's the situation, okay? We got to get somebody great for the role of Court, right? He's your lover. We got to get somebody great, somebody that's known to people. And I tell you what, you've got every right to be making that decision, Sharon. Of course you have. You're a producer. You're the star of the show. But I can tell you something now. It ain't going to be no unknown fucking Australian, okay? So get that shit out of your head. Have a look at the list I sent you, and we'll make a decision. And she goes, whatever you say, Mike. Tush. She goes, that's what I'm dealing with. All right? So for the fact that she went out on a limb for me the way she did, I mean, I love Sharon. She's cool.
Thank you for sharing this. She was here like 4 or 5 years ago and had a great time. I hope you have a good time in Zurich.
I'm assuming we're keeping all these stories to ourselves, right?
You're an actor who can physically adapt or change to fill out the role. You have gained 29 kilos for the Insider. How do you do such a thing? And is it easier to gain weight or to lose weight for a role?
Oh, Christian, you're so funny. Yeah, so it might not appear to be so, but I'm currently 26 kilograms lighter than I was when I shot Nuremberg. And I've got a couple of jobs coming up. It's just part of the gig, right? I've got a couple of jobs coming up, so I'll let you into a secret. Fuck yeah. Maximus lives. No, so, to me, engaging yourself physically, it's all part of it, you know. And really with the Insider at the time, I don't think the weight gain was anywhere near as much as that. I think it was about 12 or so kilos on the inside. And that only came about from choosing to have a sedentary lifestyle, you know, to just not really be that focused on what you're eating, not be exercising, not go to the gym, blah, 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 you know. You know, I've picked up so many injuries over time, right? And there was a time in my life when I was going out with a girl called Meg Ryan, okay? And one day she said, "You have to tell me where all your scars are from," you know? So we start going through the scars, and she goes, "They're all from movies." She was so fucking disappointed. Apparently, movie scars are not real life. But yeah, I mean, just basically, I've got no cartilage in my big toes anymore because of all the sports that I used to like. And when you're doing stunts, require a lot of lateral movement and the ability to be able to stop. I have heel fasciitis in both heels. I have shin splints. I have bone marrow edemas under both knees. I have one disintegrating hip. I have a rib on my spine that pops off whenever it gets under too much pressure. I've had 2 operations on this shoulder. This one needs an operation, but I'm not fucking doing that shit anymore. You know, that's the truth of it, you know? Because you might see one take that worked beautifully. You didn't see the 11 beforehand where things went to shit, you know? And there's been a whole bunch of times, man, where my ability to stop on a dime has actually saved my life, right? One time with, you know, with Rolf Mueller on Gladiator, right? So the shot is there's going to be a chariot bearing down on us with 4 horses. And Rolf is sitting in the middle of the road. He's been injured. He's got an arrow in the leg or something, right? Do you know who I'm talking about, Rolf Mueller, right? Fucking, you know, there's, you know, Mont Blanc, and then there's Rolf. You know, he's a big-ass motherfucker. That's how we'd say it in Australia. I don't know if you understand. So I've got to go and pick him up, apparently, according to Ridley. I've got to pick him up, and I've got to drag him off, get him out of the way of the chariot, right? And we do, you know, one take, and I thought it went pretty well. And Ridley's like, no, you got to wait. You got to wait till the chariot's closer. So we do another take, you know, and he goes, just wait a little bit longer, right? And the third time, and now that, you know, so I don't leave my mark until, you know, way later. So the chariot, I can already smell it. It's that close, right? And I get to Rolf, right? And for whatever reason, he's got himself in an awkward position, so he can't get him up, right? Get himself up. So I'm looking back at the chariot, and there's like, I mean, milliseconds, all right? So I just get underneath that motherfucker and throw him off the road and get it. And I could feel the horse and the wheels go past my head as we just got out of the way, you know? And Ridley goes, yeah, it's great. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Can we do it one more time? It's like, fuck you, you old bastard. But, you know, sometimes things go horribly wrong and you get bashed up, you know? On the set of Robin Hood, it seemed like a really simple idea. There's a guy caught on this portcullis in this castle. I climb up to him. It's like about a 14-foot climb. I untangle him, and then we both jump off the door together, you know? And on the day, we were supposed to prep the ground in front of the gate, you know? But we got involved in these conversations because we've got like 30 fire pots, we've got 600 extras, there's a lot of stuff going on. And so we're all trying to like get our timings right. And we've talked this through so long that Ridley goes, come on, man, you know, we've got 20 minutes before we lose the light, we've got to shoot this, right? So action, I get up the top of the door, and as I turn, I release the guy. As I turn to jump, I realize we didn't prep the ground, you know? And all you got to do is you get a spade and just chop up the dirt so it's a little softer, you know? So I'm in the air. This is a couple of seconds, you know? I'm in the air and I'm looking down going, fuck me, this is going to hurt, right? And so I try to position my body so I can land on the balls of my feet, but it's undulating. So before the balls of my feet hit, my heels hit, right? So I'm like, just the shock just goes straight through my body, and I just keeled over. And the only thing I can remember hearing is Ridley's voice from the tent going, oh shit. Now, it hurt, right? Took a little bit of time, but we still got another take in. I went back up to the gate and did the jump again, right? After we'd prepped the ground. The next day, I was meeting my cousin, who used to be a professional cricket player. I was meeting him at Lord's Cricket Ground because it was a place that he'd had a lot of success and it meant a lot to him. So I turn up, right? But he meets me at the main gate, but he wants me to walk to the other side of the cricket ground. Cricket grounds are big places, right? So I'm walking, and I literally can barely walk. And I've got a suit on and a tie, because you have to wear that sort of stuff to go into the members area and blah, blah, blah. And these leather shoes. And I'm inching along. And I remember there was this like one English voice cuts through the crowd, you know, because people go, hey, you know. And one guy goes, what's wrong with your fucking legs, gladiator? Right. And now cut to 2019. I'm playing Roger Ailes in The Loudest Voice. And I keep having these weird things where the muscle underneath the other muscles and my calves keep tearing, right? And you can't do anything about them because they're covered, so you can't put any ointment directly on them, but it's like this weird sensation. So I go and start seeing doctors in New York and then some doctors in LA, just getting MRI, X-ray. What's going on with my fucking legs, you know? And this doctor's sitting there and he goes, just looking at the MRI, when did you break your legs? I went, I've never broken my legs, mate, you know? He goes, oh, yes, you have. I would say by the look of this, it's 10 years ago. Right? And I'm sitting there and just, whoosh, that pain came back to me. I put spiral fractures in both my shin bones, right, on that fucking movie, and kept going to work.
Yep.
So you don't just get to walk away sometimes. Sometimes you carry things with you.
You've had the biggest star success. You were nominated for an Oscar 3 years in a row. In other words, there is Marlon Brando, and then comes Russell Crowe. Was there ever a period where you had enough and wanted to leave the movie business?
Bottom line is, I'm unreasonably in love with my job. Okay? You might get pleasure out of it. So do I. Now, does it every now and then get to be a little bit too much and you need some time away? Absolutely, you know. I've made 5 movies since last December. I was on the 6th, right? Wondering how the fuck I was going to find the energy. You know, I'm looking at the requirements for the character of Ramirez in Highlander. And the director, Chad Stileski, has agreed to let me play Ramirez as a Spaniard, unlike Sean Connery, who played Ramirez as a Scotsman. God bless Sean, great actor. But I really was at such a low ebb. I was very unsure of how I was going to be able to find the energy for it. And I was at a low ebb panic because I've never felt that empty. But 5 different characters, and these characters all have their own complications, you know. One of them's a movie called Beast in Me, and I play this sort of former trainer who's now dying of various diseases. The next one is a thing called Bear Country. Funny as fuck, where I play an Albanian money launderer. The next one after that was Billion Dollar Spy, where I play a Russian scientist who's decided to sell secrets, Russian state secrets to the Americans. Then after that, I went Unabomb. I play a Harvard professor, the guy that taught Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, when he was a young man, who is, you know, some people think is the guy who twisted his mind around because he made him part of this study that he was doing. And then after that, a movie for a director called Patrick McKinley, who I've worked with as an editor a few times, and he's a freaking genius. And that's with Ethan Hawke. It's called The Wait. These are all very complex characters, you know? So I'm on that set for the 6th movie, and I'm, you know, saying to people who didn't want to listen, I'm in trouble here, you know? I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to do, you know? And Henry, unfortunately for Henry Cavill, my son, got injured his Achilles, so production shut down. And that's terrible for Henry and terrible for the production, but I'm pretty sure that was God answering my prayers, if that actually can happen. And I'm very pleased that I now get to reface that. I won't be back on that set till about March, and that's good because it was unhealthy. Now, you'd say to yourself, well, why would you do so many jobs in a row? That wasn't the plan. You agree to do something, you sign on to something, and then often, especially in independent film, people lose their finance, things change or whatever. So it just so happened that things that I'd signed on to in 2022 were now made in 2025. And one after the other, bang, bang, bang. And everybody, all of those productions talking to each other, trying to work out, we'll give them 4 days off here or whatever. Like, oh, fuck. You know, so it's a slightly unfortunate situation, but luckily for me, I get to do a couple of things like this, but then I get to go home for a while and recharge. So that's as important as preparation is like those periods where it's all about just emptying your life out, and it's me and the cows and the horses and the wallabies, and I'm just in the bush and, you know, not thinking about anything to do with my job. And then gradually, you know, you sort of get bored of so much space and you start that thing of just quietly contemplating what's coming towards you. And that's the pleasure. If you can get it like that, if you can get your schedule to operate like that, that's the best.
It's amazing. You not only do movies, you have a band, you're a lead singer, the Indoor Garden Party. When do you find time to rehearse, and how many concerts do you play?
I think last year we did 30-something shows in 6 different countries, 60,000 kilometers. This year we'll do one show, December 20th in Sydney. Year before, 2023, we did a East Coast of Australia tour, but then we also played in Italy and in Malta and then the Czech Republic, which I believe you were at that gig. You know, the music and the acting are entwined, you know. Other people see it as completely separate things, but they're just not. Creatively, if I'm writing a song, it's the same place that if I was sitting down thinking about a character and what a character might say in any given moment, you know, it's the same place. And for me, rock and roll is my theater. That's where I started, you know. Now, yes, I've done straight plays and I've done stage musicals, but I started, you know, performing in bands, in pubs and in nightclubs. That's what I do. So it's part of refreshing my brain and my heart and my soul is walking onto a rock and roll stage, you know. On a film set, everything is scheduled, everything is controlled. On a rock and roll stage, I don't know what the fuck's going to happen, you know, and that's exciting, and that's why I do it. It builds me up, you know. I mean, I've worked with Anthony Hopkins, and he's like, oh, thank God I get to go and do a season of Lear, because that'll, you know, fill me up again. And to me, going on a rock and roll tour and singing songs that I've written, things that are about my life, right? As opposed to a character that I'm playing. That's my King Lear, you know? And look, I'm not sure when we're playing back in Europe again, but probably somewhere next year. Come and have a look, because if you like what I do in movies, I guarantee you, you'll like what I do in front of a band.
I have 2 more questions, and then we take a couple from the audience, if you're fine with that. Tonight we are giving you the Lifetime Achievement Award, and in preparing for tonight, I browsed through the list of your film, and it's amazing. You've been around always. So many of us have grown up watching your films, and it was interesting outside, the fans. They had very different posters. Some had gladiators, others had the insider. So you really left the impact. When you look back, what are you most grateful for?
I was somewhere recently, right, and I was with somebody who's known me a long, long time, right? And they asked me, how many movies have you made now? And I didn't know the answer. And I sort of took a guess, and they knew the answer, and I was wrong, you know? I thought it was X, and they said, no, it's more than that, right? And then he said, if you'd only ever gotten to make one film, would have you been happy? And I said, yeah. You know, film is such a significant thing. You know, the idea that you, as an actor, you get to make a feature film. You know, and that the first film for me, the first lead role was a movie called The Crossing. It was directed by a guy called George Ogilvy, who's loved and respected in certain circles, but not necessarily a household name. But he was a fantastic teacher, an incredible mentor. He had been an actor himself, and one of the actresses that used to work with him in theater said to me, the reason that George became a director is he's too fucking good as an actor. He would be on stage and nobody would look at anybody but him, you know? And which was a very interesting thing to find out about him, you know, because when I met him, he was a much older man and, you know, it had been a long time since he'd been a director, you know? But George gave me a piece of wisdom, and I've passed this wisdom on probably to thousands of young actors, and I'll share it with you, you know. What he said to me was, the thing about the profession of acting, you're only ever expected to do one thing, and that is to give. On a daily basis, in front of the camera, you give. You give to the other actor, you give to the camera, you give to the lighting state, you know. You're only ever expected to give. So, on those days where it's your 15th consecutive shooting day, you haven't had a full night's sleep for a month or two, you're physically worn out because of the things, your fight sequences or whatever you've been doing, you're mentally and emotionally drained because of what the character's requirements are. You might be doing love scenes, you might be doing highly emotional scenes, you know, attending somebody's funeral, the death of a parent or whatever. On those days, when you feel you have absolutely nothing left, as an actor, the only thing that you are expected to do is to give. And that has held me in good stead for 40-something years, because there's been lots of times where I get to that moment, I go, oh my God, I'm so fucking tired, and then I remember, the only thing I'm expected to do now is to give, and that's what I do.
Thank you. So we have time for 2 questions. Raise your hand and there are microphones.
Thank you very much. What is your goal as what is mainly your goal as actor? Your purpose, and so do you understand it? What I say it in German. Was ist das Ziel als Schauspieler? Was ist Ihr Ziel als Schauspieler?
What is your goal? What keeps you doing it?
I think we're pretty sure we discussed the fact that I love my job, right?
Yeah.
And it changes all the time, you know? And there might be people in the room who go to the same office building or office every single day of their lives and stuff like, I can't do that, you know? I gotta have things, I gotta have the world shifting underneath me for me to keep interested. So this is gonna sound very trite and it might sound very glib, but I've been saying this sort of thing for about 40 years and I'm still consistent with it. And I'm not saying this to get a certain response. I'm just saying this because it's fucking true, right? I make movies for you. I make movies because I want to make you fucking cry. I want you to be sitting in a room like this with 1,000 other people that you don't know, and I want those lights to come down, and I want you to share the communal fucking experience of that narrative as it opens up in front of you. I want to reach down your throat, grab your fucking heart, and go, ah, 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 ah. And just when you think you understand what I can do, then I'll do something else to freak you out, right? I work, unlike your politicians, for you.
Thank you. One more on this side. Poor guy.
Stand up, yell out, loud voice.
So this actually follows on to that question quite well. I think you're known for your dramatic intensity, but you're also an underappreciated comedic actor. Are there any more comedies coming, A Nice Guys 2 or anything along those lines, where we see more of your...
Bear Country, mate. You're going to fucking love it. Bear Country is directed by Derek Bort, who directed another movie I did called Unhinged, where I played the guy in the Road Rage movie, right? So in that movie, Bear Country, is Luke Evans, Teresa Palmer, Aaron Paul, Nina Dobrev. It's a great cast, and the premise is really fucking stupid, but it's hilarious. And I can't wait for people to see it, because I really enjoyed being an Albanian money launderer.
We're looking forward to that. You have given us a lot with your movies and also with this conversation.
That fella.
One more.
Stand up, yell out, loud voice. All right, microphone.
Hello, thank you. I want to ask you, is very different for you when you prepare a character in the role when it's a true person from a fictional character? How you approach it is very different for you. Thank you.
Well, the approach isn't different, man, but I understand why you would ask the question. The thing is, right, I've been very lucky to be able to play some significant people, right? Jeffrey Wigand in The Insider, for example. You know, he's not like a household name or whatever, but you know, it was Jeffrey Wigand's efforts that, you know, finally got the world to see the truth about the negative effects of tobacco smoke. And I say that very cleanly as a smoker. You know, so there's that situation. There's, you know, John Nash in Beautiful Mind. There's James J. Braddock in Cinderella Man, you know. And the responsibility is different, particularly if I'm impressed by that person or I believe that person should be honored. Then it becomes unbelievably important to me to make sure that we do honor that person. And in the same way with playing Hermann Göring, you know, it's very easy just to see him from a black and white perspective, you know. And while he was engaged in some extremely dishonorable things, you know, I do think I could see where he began, and that was different from where he ended up. So I wanted to find a way for people to see that whole thing I was discussing earlier, that at a certain point he lost control of the narrative and he tried to regain it. But yeah, very definitely there's a different responsibility if you're playing a real person. It requires a little bit more from you to make sure that the people that knew that man, you know, the grandchildren who are still alive or whatever, look at that film and they recognize their grandfather. It's as simple as that, you know. Because if it's not real for them, then it's invalid at that point, you know. So, yeah, and, you know, at a certain point back in the early 2000s, I thought, you know, I've done enough biopics. And I ended up turning down a couple of jobs that I now regret, you know? But I turned them down because people started sort of saying like, oh, Russell Crowe, he only does biopics. I'm like, fuck off, you know? So it was, and that's kind of like I'm sort of sharing with you a moment where I got influenced by that white noise, you know? But I try not to be influenced by the white noise. And it's mainly because of situations like that where I was, and I've ended up making a decision that later on still haunts me because I didn't step forward into something that I should have done, you know? But yeah, different level of responsibility. always try to find the reason to love the person that I'm playing. You know, love is a funny word, actually. That's not right. Okay, to regard the person that I'm playing. I do find, because it's an English tradition, that you have to love the character, right? But as we all know, as soon as you love something, you start forgiving, right? And that's not what I want. I want to have a clean perspective on that character. And if that character is an honorable person, I want to make sure that that honor is in place. And at the same time, if that person is a motherfucker, I want there to be a motherfucker on the ground. You know what I mean? And I want sort of like to look for the truth and look for the reality. I mean, it's only of benefit if we've done enough work that when you watch something like A Beautiful Mind. And remember, when that movie came out, there's a whole bunch of people in the business of judging those diseases, schizophrenia and quadrophenia, whatever, blah blah, right? So, and they were like, this particular thing that John Nash had, it was a audio thing. He could hear voices, but he wasn't necessarily seeing things. I was like, yeah, but he was in his fucking head, mate. And this is a feature film. What do you expect us to do? And the thing is that movie is so effective because of that one trick, right? You start watching them, A Beautiful Mind, and you believe in this character, you believe in the situations, and then bang, you realize you've been in his imagination. And that is valid, right? That's a valid choice from a filmmaker's perspective to try and show people what that level of schizophrenia can do to a mind, So, I've been really lucky, man. I've worked with some incredible film directors. I've had, incredible characters and things put in front of me, but I will say, if there's any young actors in here, you do make your own luck. You position yourself to get lucky, and that's because you stay prepared. You work on working. You don't take a break between jobs. I'm only just now at the age of 61. I'm discovering what a fucking vacation is, man. Seriously. The comedian Jimmy Carr? A couple of years ago, we were talking, and he goes, so where do you go on holidays? If you go on holidays, where do you go? And I'm like, I don't go on holiday. I go to work or I'm at home. When I'm at home, that's my holiday. I'm in the bush, I just fucking around. And he goes, no. You've got to start actually taking a break. So one year we went to Puglia together, and then this year we went to Marbella. The sun shines every day, there's clay tennis courts. Mate, vacations are good.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Russell Crowe.